Everybody, this is James Gorey. Welcome to the Banana Republican. March 31st, last day of March, last day of the first quarter. Uh, let's do an Iran war update and even beyond that, but so much is going on. Look, from number one, Trump is seriously weighing a military operation. Presumably, that would involve a team, a group of American soldiers, U.S. soldiers, to extract nearly the 1,000 pounds or so of highly enriched uranium that apparently Iran has. It's hard to know, but uh, depending on who you read and what you read. But Trump's point is that Iran must surrender their nuclear dust or face annihilation. Um, what do we think about that? What do I think about that? Well, I mean, Trump's put a good job of annihilating Iran so far. I'm not saying I disagree with all of it. I don't. I think it's had to happen. I think Iran, well, I know Iran has been a tremendously destabilizing force in the Middle East for 40 years, if not longer. And they certainly have American blood on their hands. They have Israeli blood on their hands. They have blood on their hands from all over the world, all parts of the world. I should say many parts of the world. Uh, so, are they going to surrender their nuclear material? Probably not. Um, but will Trump succeed? Will the U.S. military succeed, I should say, in acquiring it, getting all of it? Um, that seems doubtful. The reason I say it is simply because the reality is if you're in the war, you're going to put that nuclear material wherever you can hide it. You're going to hide it really, really well. And I doubt that a one-time or two-time kind of attack or ground operation to capture it all. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's realistic. So saying that, is it worth doing? Probably is worth doing. But I think what's more worth doing is, as I mentioned in an earlier podcast, is let's arm the Iranian people who want freedom, who want liberation, who want, we've taken out the top layer. Where's the leadership? Where's the leadership that um, should be available? And quite frankly, there should have been a stand-in, someone ready to go. And I thought it was Pahlavi, the son of the crown prince of the Shah. But I know he's somewhere close by, somewhere where he can step in. But that hasn't happened yet, and I have to ask why. I think a lot of people are wondering why that is. I mean, shoot, you've decimated their military, you've taken away their air defenses, you've decapitated the government for all intents and purposes. You've demolished a lot of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards bases and so forth. Um, Now's a great time, in my estimation, to capture the attention and the willingness of 40 or 50,000 Iranian expats or people in Iran to smuggle arms in and get some arms to these people and coordinate it and take over the damn government and get these people out of here and restructure, realign Iran to the Western world, which is where they used to be. So I don't see the huge need and necessity for American troops to go in when we have plenty of Iranians willing to go out there and protest and die at 40. Not that they're willing to die, but they've been killed by the tens of thousands. Let's arm these people. Let's get arms, weapons into the country, arm them, organize them, and with communication, with coordination, with military leadership, um, hopefully from the Iranian army, which is not the same as the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, two different factions there, and do the deed, get it done. I don't see the extent of this war. I don't see the benefit of this going much further. Um, we've got to stop Iran from shooting these missiles everywhere, and that's what I would do. I would work on a domestic uprising, armed domestic uprising, and let them do what needs to be done. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, He came out and said recently, hey, the war is beyond the halfway point. Is it? How does he know? What, what is the halfway point? What's the end point? Um, is it the complete cleansing and sanitation of Gaza? Is it blowing up all the tunnels? Is it capturing every member of Hamas and killing them? Where is that end point? I don't know. I haven't really seen the big plan. We all get, we can watch the talking heads and hear their opinions, and I think some of them are right on. But at the end of the day, it feels as if there's a mission creep here. Not mission creep in the sense of, well, we don't want it to happen, but there needs to be some clear, concise goals. Yeah, getting nuclear dust is one of them, as Trump said. You've decapitated the government, but who are you talking to? Why is the mission half over, the war half over? What's the other half look like? These things we need to understand. I'm not seeing these. I'm not getting a clear picture of that, particularly with Iran shooting missiles all over the Middle East infrastructure. There's missile attacks going everywhere, right? And they're trying to widen the war. And again, who is Donald Trump talking to in Iran? Do they have any influence? It doesn't look like it. It does not look like it. That doesn't mean it's not happening, but it's just not evident at this point. So those are big questions we should have. Um, and by the way, that kind of takes us to Europe. Europe is not cooperating with the U.S., and that has a huge implications. It's a huge implications for NATO, for the European alliances, and so forth. Italy's not allowing the U.S. to use their bases to mount an attacks against Iran. Spain has a law up for a vote that is going to imprison anyone who criticizes Islam, 3-year prison sentence. Britain is now passing anti-Christian laws. They have Muslim mayors in the top layers of the UK government. Muslim mayors and in the top layers of UK government. And of course, Germany is heavily influenced by its Islamic population, as are the Netherlands and Belgium. So I think the result here is that Europe is seeing and demonstrating a huge divergence between what it considers its interests and those of the U.S. And here's a couple of facts that Europe is just now coming to grips with, and that is, they traded nuclear power and coal for wind and solar power and Russian natural gas, and they were supposed to be out of, through with Russian natural gas by 2027. They've delayed that. And for good reason. Russia has said, "Look, we're going to stop natural gas if you continue to support the U.S. against Iran and Israel." So that's what's going on there. Europe has put itself in a horrible position. They've just sped up an agreement with the U.S. to buy U.S. natural gas. And so take a look at this bigger picture. You've got Europe with tremendous Islamic populations passing anti-Christian laws, coming on the other side of the U.S., opposite the U.S. on the war in Iran in many cases, and finding itself strapped for energy. They're not energy independent, they're energy dependent and dependent on all the wrong people. Well, not all the wrong people, they're dependent on Russia. They're going to be dependent on the U.S. as well for natural gas. And here's the key point. While Europe has spent its time and energy condemning the U.S., condemning the war in Iran, condemning Israel, the U.S. is now the #1 oil producer in the world. In fact, we outproduce Saudi Arabia and Russia combined. We're the #1 natural gas producer in the world. We outproduce Russia and I think Saudi Arabia combined. U.S. is #1 oil producer, energy supplier on Earth right now, and that's due to Donald Trump. It's obviously not due to the Biden administration. That wasn't the case then, but it is the case now. And right behind us is, in terms of oil and natural gas, is Russia. They're pretty way up there in natural gas. And so Europe is finding itself having to make these difficult decisions while at the same time refusing to support the American military efforts in Iran, but also relying on American military support and financial support for Ukraine, which they've been doing since the war started. And Britain, who's been the Ukraine's #1 European, probably #1 supporter, Britain is running out of money, running out of assets to support the Ukrainian effort. And Zelensky knows it. And Zelensky's about to chat with Europe again, Parliament, if he hasn't already. So there's big problems, and the reality is the world has changed under Trump. I think we can all agree to that, but it's not only changed for America, but for the better, really, arguably, for the better. We're energy independent, natural gas independent. We have a safe border, secure border, and we're disrupting the heavily destabilizing influence of Iran in the Middle East. Now, that could all change, but that's where it stands right now. But the upshot of that is, from alliance perspective, is NATO is essentially done. What China was unable to do, and Russia, which was to split the Europeans from the U.S. and NATO, was to break NATO up, that's been done by Trump and the American policies. But it's been done in a way that has revealed the divergent interests and the divergent cultural natures of our two societies. Europe is abandoning its Christian culture, is abandoning its capitalist culture, economic model, which wasn't always capitalist, and there's always some kind of blend there. I think the Nordic countries are the most capitalist, as well as Poland and Hungary. But Western Europe and NATO is abandoning those things, abandoning those values. So we have a lot less in common. And that, by the way, goes also to the Pope, which I mentioned in an earlier podcast. The Pope is condemning the U.S. by way of saying that God does not hear the prayers of people who wage war. And I think I quoted Deuteronomy 20, which effectively the Lord says, Israel, I am with you in war. I am with you as you battle your enemies. And make no mistake about it, Iran is an enemy of Israel. Make no mistake about it. The Bible's crystal clear on who Persia is and what role they're going to play. Now, I bring the Bible in here because, well, a lot of people will cringe. I don't care. If the Bible says there's going to be an alliance between Russia and Turkey and Iran, which has never happened before, well, there is now. So put that in your anti-biblical pipe and smoke it. Just get the reality. Face reality. Things are unfolding. And the fact is that most of Western Europe is no longer a Christian culture. It's atheistic, morphing into Islamic. Italy, Poland, Hungary, and a few others are the exception to that rule. Okay? So the war is changing things. The war is bringing out conflicts, differences in national interest, differences in cultural interest, differences in economic interest that were there, but were always covered up by this empire kind of grand alliance superstructure where the U.S. would cave on a variety of things like funding for NATO, American bases, U.S. base usage and so forth in Europe as a projection of power. Well, now that's going away. The Italians are saying you can't use our bases. I think Germany's probably going to be next. The UK certainly is no fan of the US, at least the UK government power, Starmer's government. So there's been really the rift that was perhaps hidden under other layers, like with Ukraine and so forth, that's wide open. And the reality is Europe is putting itself in a horrible position. They're siding with the Islamic forces of the world, which they're anti-Israel, they're anti-US. They're not in energy. They're dependent on their enemies in terms of Russia for gas, for power, and they're basically going to have an energy shortage here very, very soon. The Telegraph points that out in a piece. I think so does the Financial Times. But the point being is that Europe has put itself. The Iran war has kind of stripped away the veneer of the NATO alliance that existed for years and decades. Against an enemy that no longer exists at least in the form that it did before as the Soviet Union. And so now we're having other key factors, other key interests that are redefining the relationship and actually destroying it. Um, and at the same time, the MAGA motivation of making America great again, that means not making NATO great. It means making America great. And where NATO doesn't serve American interest, then that's not going to be the plan. That's not going to be the overarching understanding. That's gone. And that's a huge, huge shift in the world. So there's a lot of huge shifts going on, tremendous shifts, energy shifts from the Middle East to the U.S., a military shift from kind of this NATO conservative to a much more bold and unilateral position with the U.S. So there's also the U.S. pushing back against China in Panama, in Venezuela, in Iran. Going to be Cuba next. And yeah, China is now feeling that pressure from the U.S. that it didn't feel before. And China's losing its ability to control its energy supplies because the U.S. is influencing those energy supplies, whether it be from Venezuela or from Iran. Another part of this is that Europe may end up having to buy its natural gas from Israel. Israel has a huge natural gas supply in the Eastern Med. It doesn't need to come from Iran or Egypt or Iraq or wherever it might be. It just comes from Israel, from the Med, shipped on boats. Just take the boat across the Med and deliver it to Europe. That's doable. And that may be what happens. And that may be a big threat to Russian natural gas. In fact, it should be. It will be. So I can see Russia getting its knickers in a twist over that, I'd say. So the bottom line is Europe is no longer the culture that it was. The Iran war update is a couple things. No end in sight. No criteria for winning, for declaring victory. Missiles are still being fired. Some estimates are that we've maybe destroyed a third of their missile capability, which means 2/3 are intact. There's a big chance for a widening of the war, but the U.S. is in this weird position where if it stops now, then Iran kind of can claim victory, right? You didn't topple us, and the controlling forces of the Revolutionary Guard and those institutions are still intact. To what level, I don't know, but we know they're intact to some level because no one's stepping forward and saying, I'm now in charge and we're changing Iran's theocracy into some kind of democracy. No one's come forward. So the fact that nobody has come forward, that tells me that we haven't accomplished the goals that we want to accomplish. And that's regime change, and that's changing the orientation of Iran from a radical, theocratic, dictatorial, quasi, on the threshold of nuclear power that threatens everybody, to someone who wants to be allies with Israel again, the U.S. and the West, and westernize itself. So I haven't seen that happening. So we've decapitated leadership to a large degree. We've broken a lot of their things, blown up a lot of their things, minimized their air defenses and so forth. But there hasn't been that shift. There hasn't been that ideological, cultural shift away from doing what they're doing into the West. And until we see that, I think that's the ultimate victory that has to be done. And by the way, the fact that the Pope, as I said, weighs in and says, well, God doesn't hear your prayers, that's helping the Iranians, by the way. That's helping the Shias. That's not helping the people who want freedom. That's not helping the people who are dying in the streets in Tehran and other places. And I think that's a takeaway that a lot of people are going to look at closely. That's a reality. A lot of people are going to say, wait, why would you do this? Why would you say this? When you know that Israel is really fighting for its survival. So from a biblical view, kind of segueing from there, wars and rumors of wars, I'd say that's kind of check. That's a pretty big indication. The Bible says, look, at the end of days, at some point, there's going to be a lot of rumors of war. Jesus says that. You're going to see wars and rumors of wars. Well, we've got the wars part down. You're going to see Persia fighting against Israel. Well, we got that down. You're going to see Christian persecution. Well, the Palm Sunday massacres in Nigeria are certainly would count for that. Check. Interestingly, at the same time, we're seeing Christian persecution in Israel. We're seeing laws being proposed to make it illegal to quote the Bible. We're seeing laws make it illegal to proselytize in Israel for Christianity. So it's not just these Islamic regimes, part of the Israeli government, part of the Israeli society has tremendous antipathy towards Christianity. And that's going to be, I think that's going to be a big problem for them. It has been in the past. And I'm not casting judgment on anybody, but I just know that Jesus said, look, I won't come back. There won't be peace in Israel till they understand who the Messiah is. It is him. If you're a Christian, that's what you believe. If you're an Orthodox Jew, you don't believe that. It doesn't. It is what it is. But I don't think it augurs well for Israel to be persecuting Christians. That being said, there are plenty of other signs. Whether it's the breaking of Elam's bow. Elam is in, I think, western Iran. That's a Jeremiah quote. It says, "Well, there will be a time when Elam's bow. A bow is what you launch arrows with. An arrow kind of looks like a missile. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to speak in those terms. Anyway, I think we're breaking their ability to launch missiles and to have the power to create nuclear weapons. And so a lot of these biblical profiles of the times, they're signs of the times, are here. And I don't think it's too much to say, look, what are the book is talking about these things with such accuracy, the players, what they're doing, who's involved, and it's the region. It's very, very interesting, to say the least. It's prophetic. I believe it. I think it's God's word. I don't think the Lord would mislead us. So I think that we look at these signs and we go, well, that's, from a biblical perspective, things are falling, maybe not falling into place, I guess, in a sense. They're falling into place. And there's another prediction, another prophecy that talks about evil in high places, in the highest of high places. And that always kind of shocked me. Not shocked me is the wrong word, but kind of made me question, well, there's always been evil in high places, so what's the big deal, right? I mean, there's always been bad people in government. But I think when you look at the Epstein files, I think that that's a huge indicator. That's something new that we haven't had before. And there are two takeaways from that. One, how many people are involved? I mean, Prince Andrew and tons of people have been out to that island, which I don't think is a good place to be. I think it's a wicked place to be. But the very fact that the elites of our society, the ruling elites, are all associated, if not all, most, are associated with Jeffrey Epstein. And we know this because their names are there. We can see the travel logs and so forth. But the flip side of that is, so we know there's evil in high places. The other side is, nobody's been arrested. Nobody's paying a price for this. Nobody's worried about it. Or if they're worried about it, they're certainly not being perp walked out of their house, except for Prince Andrew, of course. So this whole notion, this whole prediction, well, there's going to be evil in high places, we're seeing both sides of that. Yeah, it exists, and then nothing's being done about it. How evil is that? That makes it even more evil, right? That's even a new level of evil. Is that, yeah, we know it happened, and we're not going to do anything about it. That's a huge problem, and that's what we're seeing. Again, if you're on the left, you're on the right, you're in the middle, we can all agree that nobody is being arrested for being in the Epstein files. Apparently there's videos, apparently there's all kinds of horrible things going on, and I'm not going to look at those because I don't want to see it. But I've heard enough from people who have, and So that's another side. So when we look at the Iran war, when we look at what Iran has kind of uncovered or revealed about the U.S., about Russia, about Israel, about the progress of the war, the definition of victory, the inability, apparently, of replacing the regime at this point, the ability of Iran to widen the war, which it's doing, and also the effects of Europe being at the same time um, unmaking itself from a self-sustaining, energetic, vibrant culture. They're abandoning their culture. They are left dependent on energy. The NATO alliance is shredding. It's just falling apart as we speak, and Europe is becoming less important. And uh, I think they're opening themselves up to some tremendous social upheaval with all their Islamic population. I think we're already seeing that, by the way. So these are all biblical points, biblical prophecies that God tells us are going to happen. So they are. And this Iran war has been just a huge factor in revealing all these things and allowing them to come to the top, bubble to the surface, where we can actually see what the effect is. So is Iran defeated or just demoralized? I guess we have to wait and see. But that's what's happening. That's what this Iran war has done. It's just promoted a whole notion of uncertainty, of destruction, revealed lies of alliances that are no longer relevant, and has promoted and instigated and motivated tremendous amounts of people who are against the West, within the West. So I think those are new developments that we haven't seen in a long time, and um, we haven't ever seen them ever actually, and I think that we're going to see a lot more of it. I don't think that, just to end this thing, I don't think the war is going to end the way we think it is, the way Trump wants it to be ending. I'd like to see it end. I'd like to see it end today. I'd like to see the regime be gone and a peaceful regime that set the Iranian people free and let the region blossom. I hope that happens. Um, it doesn't look like it will at this point, but we'll see. So if you like content like this, conversation, um, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, comment, share, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.